All right, welcome everyone to another ForecastBuilder webinar. Looks like we got pretty decent attendance looking at the attendee list. So this presentation on ForecastBuilder, we've got about 25 slides or so, and I'll just jump right into it here. I did kind of want to start off. You've seen for a lot of you that went through the training plans, this layout here for the main ForecastBuilder slide, and just I really wanted to hone in on the part about here that ForecastBuilder is here to give you a good foundation for IDSS, because I don't think we can have effective IDSS without having the consistent science-based process before we get there. So that's again what ForecastBuilder is trying to do. A couple opening thoughts. Over the past couple months, we've had ForecastBuilder installation and usage expanding nationally. I've been coordinating personally with people from Portland, Oregon to Mobile, Alabama, in Norman, just to name a couple of places. So it's not just a central region thing anymore. It's growing nationally. So, and actually, that's been a great thing. We've been bringing in improvements from feedback received, again, from multiple offices and regions. And really, this is great to go along with the vision of what ForecastBuilder is supposed to be, is this rapid science sharing approach to forecasting in GFE, to bring in ideas that from forecasters across the country and get them in and rapidly spread them out across the country. So on the topics today, we'll talk a little bit about this more central region-wide, but the RLC agreement, a little kind of reminder here. Going in about this document about forecasting the ForecastBuilder Era, look at some recent snow events, some of the changes with this latest ForecastBuilder release, some reminders as we go through the winter season here. Talk a little bit about the Enhanced Short-Term Forecast initiative and its revitalization, and then, of course, open it up for some Q&A. So if we look here at the Central Region RLC agreement, the big thing that was in it is that all Central Region offices were to utilize the full version of ForecastBuilder, which is now the only version in ForecastBuilder, and that includes utilizing a common starting point for period 3 through day 7. Now, something that's kind of vague in here, and I kind of wanted to get some clarification on this, and we don't have it, again, explicitly written in the agreement, but the recommendation here from the Central Region Grid Methodology Advisory Team is that all offices to use ForecastBuilder to produce snow and ice accumulations, as well as the weather grid, throughout the entire forecast. So basically, your techniques and everything that you're using for top-down grids, et cetera, and that, say, beyond period 3, will translate right nice and easy back into, right into the now portion of the forecast. So the Central Region Consistency Team, if you recall, we sort of, here in Central Region produced this forecast in the ForecastBuilder Era document. They did a nice webinar back in the March-April timeframe, and just kind of wanted to bring this back to the forefront, especially here as we go into winter season when there's a lot more components of ForecastBuilder get worked through. Some of the steps from that document include the first one here right off the bat is to, when you get into your shift in that, is to review what's the current IDSS message out there and what's in the graphical forecast database. Then proceed on to look at the current state of the atmosphere and spend a decent amount of time with that process. And then you can look at the various model and ensemble output and come up with a forecast solution and prepare to adjust the forecast as needed. Note that through this process up to this point, I haven't talked about anything about the cron running yet or anything. These are all things that you can do before the cron. And then two, talk about the ESTF period, as you're going through the shift, and this applies to after the cron, is always prepare to adjust the forecast as needed. Again, current time through period 2, which is our enhanced short-term period, and then when the cron runs, get ready to do the period 3 through day 7. Continuing on here, once the cron runs for the period 3 through day 7 portion, quality control it. And then review what's in there, focus on those targets of opportunity, collaborate too with the national centers. Again, kind of this whole idea about the fully integrated field structure kind of coming to light here, where try and make sure that things match between the national centers and your forecast. Try your best at that, and then update the IDSS messaging as needed. There is a document on this for forecast and ForecastBuilder Era, and look for that to be released early next week. And specifically for the Susan MICs on this call, please pass this on to the staff immediately. It's a good reference for them as they go through. And so a kind of a reiteration of this, I thought, talk about some good tips here for starting a forecast shift is don't idly wait for the blend of populating GFB. I know we have a tendency to kind of want to do that, to get an idea of what, here's what we're going to change or whatever. Immediately, when you get going, look for those targets of opportunity, and specifically where, time periods that are going to impact your DSS message. And again, do that prior to the blend populating GFB. Look over the model data. A really nice quick glance. If you jump in the foundation grid step, you'll have all the hazard relative grids highlighted for you. Could quickly see, boom, I've got these different hazardous concerns that I'm going to have to contend with through the next 7 days. So anticipate changes too that could occur with the new model runs. Maybe there's a winter storm on the horizon that could be moving along in a different track. There is a new tool provided within this latest update called Diff from Official. On the next webinar, I'll make sure to get a couple more images on this, but it's a nice little tool to see what differences exist between, say, various model guidance and what you have in the current forecast. Kind of run that for kicks and grins. Collaborate too on any potential changes early in the shift if possible, because you need that time for DSS messaging. So get that done if you can, even before the blend populates in GFB. Also be aware of what WPC is forecasting for both QPF and snow. Of course, you have all the WWD graphics, both coming into GFB and available on the website. And collaborate and engage as needed. And of course, the CROC will help to initiate coordination calls as needed. Talking about between WFO and WPC, I wanted to grab a couple of recent snowfall events that have occurred here over the past couple of weeks. The first one here, October 27th, 28th, on the upper left is NDFD, then on the upper right is WPC. Both look really good. You almost can't tell much of a difference between them, so that's great to see. And then if you look at the observed snowfall, actually lines up pretty well with what happened verification-wise. Maybe a little heavy there in southern Minnesota from a forecast perspective, but overall, I think really good. And should be noted too, so you get the observed snowfall can have a few little higher amounts in some spots because there's 12 or more hours of data in there. Another event here recently, November 2nd through 4th, this one encompassed in here multiple regions, west, central, and western. I think this one was just amazing when I pulled it up from NDFD. Just the consistency and detail going right across the region. One of the things that we've done this year with our Central Region Mountain offices is that we did a whole lot of collaboration going into the summer months to get everybody on a snow level approach between western and central, and I think you're seeing that come out here in this image. Look at it from WPC. Obviously you're going to get a seamless picture, but if I toggle back and forth between the two images, you can see that overall pretty similar. And then the actual observed amount came out pretty similar to, I think, what the NDFD had. So I think that's just great to see both, the consistency, the accuracy, and hopefully it didn't take a whole lot of time. So going into the ForecastBuilder release, some of the configuration changes that we've had. First one is to have an option available to utilize the NBM as the common starting point. Part of this was aided by the fact that the National SmartNet team, and give a shout out to Jerry on here, helped make a script to create this NBM database in GFE, so that made it easy for ForecastBuilder to bring it in. We still had to make some extra adjustments, but we could bring it in. And this is to support some of the Western region efforts to test out version 3 of the NBM, as well as to support the vision of ForecastBuilder, what we have in Central Region for the Weather Ready Nation Roadmap, as well as the NBM Demo PMO initiative. So we're getting closer here for that to come to reality. There are still some things with the NBM that we got to wait for, like with AWIPS build 17.2.1. Some of the elements that need to be processed have to wait till that build, but we're getting closer. There's an option here too to utilize the RTMA as the observational database. This is the one that we eventually would like to go to from a vision perspective, since that is a truth grid, what's going into NBM for their purposes of bias correction. So anytime that there are issues with the NBM, we also want to check the RTMA. It's just because of that. And again, this option was put in there. We had some Southern Region Office requests, no problem there. Again, I think too, it just completely goes along with the vision of ForecastBuilder. So, and we're making strides here with that. Another configuration change, and this was again due to feedback from offices with a lot of local terrain. There's a smooth factor that's in place for pop and sky to help kind of, sometimes from the blend, maybe it can get a little bit too, I don't know, not pixelated, but it can be a little sharp. There's this little smooth factor that can help with that, but you may want more sharp stuff going on, especially if you're local terrain site. So just be aware of that. I think the default 8, but you can adjust it down to 3 as the tech order about it. Going back to about the NBM. The Central Region Grid Methodology team here for Central Region would like to switch. Obviously, one big thing is it's much easier to maintain than SuperBlend. Seems like every AWIPS build, something's changing and it's impacting SuperBlend. Obviously, the components of SuperBlend, we have to maintain that feed. The NBM is on the SBN. It's coming into your office. And we have the cron running to keep it going. There's no problems there. And the NBM, again, always consists of office to office, and we're not having to depend on accurate timing of model delivery. The conundrum here is the data delivery versus our operational paradigm. Along with the fact that we got to wait for 17.2.1 for some of the model data, some of the data delivery is an issue too. For example, the 5C and 17 cycles of the national blend, which arrive shortly after 6 and 18C, you get these elements like temperature, dew point, wind, sky, and some CPI 06. But like POP 12 and QPF, not that we need POP 12, and QPF is, I guess, fine for the most part through 84 hours. So we have that. It should be noted, though, that with this cycle, most of the extended stuff is all still using old guidance. The only thing really new in there is about like the 12D GFS and some of the MOS guide information. So if we want stuff for the extended, we're going to have to wait till later. Then when you get to the 6 and 18Z cycles, which come in an hour later, you get the max T, min T, max min RH, and that's available through day 7. And finally, then that 7Z 19Z cycle is when you get much more of the extended updated, including some of the PPI 06 and QPF out there. It should be noted that that does include the EKD MOS, which is a big verification improvement. Talking with the NBM developers, when we get to version 3.1 to implement in July 2018, there is going to be some improvements to this. I think we get the max T, min T with the 5C, 17C cycle. But again, this may still conflict with the current operational paradigm because again, all your good updated extended stuff doesn't come until late in the NBM cycle form, at least for our current operational forecast. At this juncture, Jerry, is there anything you want to add on this? Is your our nice NBM liaison?
No, I think you covered it all, Andy.
Okay.
It's good to me.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so some of the ForecastBuilder GUI changes. First is that some of you ran into this error that you would end up with between the top-down step and creating precipitation type snow ice. That's been resolved. That happened when we put in snow level and ended up changing that whole process around and didn't correct that error in that. So again, that's fixed. We've also allowed now to publish all the grids for the chosen time range at the end. You probably, for those of you who've installed it, you've probably seen this extra dialog box that comes up after the weather creation. You know, I want everybody to remember that if you follow through the ForecastBuilder process, your grids are finalized along the way. So you do not need to have to run a separate finalized procedure. ForecastBuilder will allow you, everything's finalized, so you can publish right at the very end if you so choose. Thunder. We talked about this in the last webinar, and based on feedback, we have allowed now the ability to create probability of thunder from either based on pop or model probability. You'll see the GUI pop up. In that, you can choose between the two. I would still say to try to utilize model probabilities. Know that they likely will need to be scaled up at least within our current process. I think something's going to have to change though, because the NBM uses the model probability. So when we want to switch over to the NBM and populate pop thunder with the NBM, we may have to do some change. So the grid methodology team will still do more discussions on this topic and figure out how we might be able to rectify the probability of thunder. Also from feedback, we had a technique to try and address the lower probabilities that came into thunder using this 20% simplification, so that if your pop and your pop thunder were within 20%, so you're within 20% of each other, it would just give you the same verbiage that you would expect from pop. Well, based on feedback, a lot of people were not liking that. Sometimes they get things that they didn't expect, so that idea has been pulled. So again, Thunder's been quite the experiment here during the summer. We got a lot of good feedback, passed a lot of it up the chain. So hopefully, we'll have we'll get a better plan in place for next year. Something though that will become more common here, at least especially across the northern U.S., blowing snow. Last winter, we had a couple processes going, which wasn't as nice for consistency's sake. But it was kind of a little bit for figuring out what might be the best route to go. We had, for most of us, this statistical blown snow research that was done out of the La Crosse office. It was, both at an open site and one that had a little more vegetation around it and situated in the valley. So that worked out right, but it had some downfalls. You're not using things like, the age of the snow or trying to think like, or even like temperature data. That's where the Bagley Snow model comes in. There's a lot of good research going into that model. It was tested over in the Northern Plains, but it too has some caveats where it really didn't account for drift in snow. I know that the blowing snow is not supposed to fully represent drift in, but I think for a lot of us in the forecast realm, we kind of want to incorporate that to some degree. So with this recent bill, both methods have been combined into one. And again, findings after last winter suggested both were needed. And there's again a nice training module that's in the ForecastBuilder training plan. Definitely go through it if you haven't yet. Goes into the research about the snow model and take your time on that. I think it's like 10 to 15 minutes. And I think too that what's been going on with blowing snow is just a nice example of the iterative process that we've gone through to help improve the science in ForecastBuilder. Jumping into digital aviation, there's been quite a few changes here. For those that utilize ForecastBuilder for digital aviation, we've done a lot more greater integration with the public forecast grids. There's a lot more kind of QC checking going on back and forth. For example, if your visibility is less than a half mile, it's going to ensure the sky gets bumped up. Here's another one and that kind of correlates back to the Bagley snow model, that your visibility is going to be less than a half mile. It'll automatically ensure that you have definite blowing snow in your weather grid. Same with the less than a quarter mile, you get the quarter mile appendage onto the definite blowing snow. We also made sure to bring in the pop and visibility there into your non-precipitation type steps based on feedback. So you'll see that now. Some tools added for haze and smoke. That was based again on request. I know smoke, there may be some more improvements because there's been some work done for the HRR to help do some smoke forecasts. So that might be something we could look at more, certainly for next year. And then for the weather grid, both fog and freezing fog automatically become dense based on your visibility grid, so you don't have to select them anymore in the GUI. I do want to mention that if you're in an office that is, getting a lot of valley fog or any kind of local effect type fog, defined areas that you can always expect to see fog in, use the either use the pop valley fog or the pop marine fog procedures. They'll automatically go in and adjust your visibility, cloud-based primary sky grid for you. They're a nice little tool because we know that models can struggle in identifying sometimes some of these more local effect fog situations. A little bit about snow ratio. In the latest National SmartNet release, there was an update to snow ratio across all the SmartNets, and that was based on a science review team incorporating members across the Weather Service. And basically that review went through and looked at various methods, performance, and pitfalls, and in essence, the outcome, kind of similar like what we do with model blends, is to blend the methods together. Because each seem to have their good points and bad points. And when you blend them together, it seemed to perform better. We've actually done some early looking at them, and so far so good. Some examples here for what the blend looks like for like the NAM12, GFS, and RAP. You've got the blend of the Cobb method and the Max Teal Loft methods that have, because these models have a lot more vertical resolution, we try to use some of these other and have like vertical motion. We want to get like the Cobb method would be good for that. Whereas with like the European Canadian, we try and bring in like Max Teal Loft. We still have some vertical levels there. They're maybe not as great. I know with Canadian we don't have the vertical motion, so we can't use Cobb. But same with the Euro. But the blend of Max Teal Loft and thickness is something that works there. And we did some changes with the thickness so that we're now using the 850 to 700 for the most part. And then in the higher elevation sites, 1,000 to 500. But that too might need some adjustment in the future. So again, it's a constantly evolving thing. We do more research, do more science, look at how to improve these. Early feedback too on the NBM. The NBM has the same results from, they've incorporated the science review team into the snow ratio, and the early looks at that look also pretty positive for the snow ratio outcome. So again, we'll be monitoring this through the winter and make modifications if we need to. Some other changes, and notice this first one that I have on here, I scratched out. We're going to have a patch come out. It's going to get changed this. We were having the temperature curve to utilize NBM, but for some offices are experiencing issues, and we're not exactly sure why the diurnal procedure is struggling with it at some offices and not others, despite every office on the same diurnal version. So I'll talk a little bit about patches here in a second. And on the frost tool, there was a good discussion about frost here as we got into the later half of October with more widespread frost across central region. There, on the right is a flow chart from the University of Kentucky Agricultural Study on frost, and a lot of it again was coded up in ForecastBuilder for frost calculations. But going through it, there's some confusion about what should happen in here. And basically, what what happened was there was no automatic disavowal of frost in the original algorithm that was put in ForecastBuilder, what you saw before this latest upgrade. So the correction was applied here to zero out frost when dew point depressions were greater than 9, wind speed greater than 7, or expect after greater than or equal to 70. Feedback is also coming in about including pop, and so that's also being considered as a potential limiting factor for frost. And sometimes you might have a pop, but your sky cover is not greater than or equal to 70. And talk about that. I crossed out the temperature curve for the NBM. Here's there is a patch going to be released soon, probably early next week. We had a lengthy alpha beta testing period, but just like the NBM diurnal issue, we found some that are going to require another release. Some of the issues, again, reverting back to super blend for temperature curve, the snow level sites found that they had an issue trying to utilize rain and drizzle for step 4 ForecastBuilder, so that's been rectified. There was a quick out ESTF option that was there and out at some offices. That's been fixed. Well, there's an issue with low wind shear and conshort for digital aviation. That's fixed. And then also the hazard builder grids are being, in this latest release, are being uploaded to Central Region headquarters in preparation for some work on the Central Region weatherization roadmap. And there were some issues with that. That's been fixed as well. So again, expect a release coming out early next week. Should take like no more than 10 minutes to run through. All right, a couple reminders here on the top-down grid. Since most offices are now seeing temperatures below 40, you can expect to see your top-down grids populate from period 3 through at least day 3. If you have ice accumulation, please check both prob ice present and the max wet bubble off. Remember, both both can create ice. And one nice thing, again, when you go through step 4 of ForecastBuilder with the pre-step types creating ice accum, your ice accum grids will automatically light up red if there's somewhere in there that's non-zero. So you'll be able to quickly see, okay, here's where an area I might need to look at my prob ice present or max wet bulb. Do not delete the top-down grid. This is in a reminder module in the ForecastBuilder training. This information is good for collaboration purposes, and then 2 for the next forecast. And just if you need to do something because you're not expecting you were going to delete them before, just adjust them to meet the meteorological scenario. So, like for example, if you're getting ice accumulation, get freeze and drizzle or something, just set your prob ice present to 100, assuming here your max wet bulb's below freeze in that kind of the scenario. That's just one way to get around that. 2, you'll see if you populate top-down grids beyond day 3, there will be a warning pop up. Just if you do the top-down beyond, just we kind of talked about this last winter. Include when the confidence is high for a freeze and rain event. You think about last winter, we had one of those back in mid-January. There was a big ice storm for Kansas and Missouri. That was a perfect case where you could probably put the top downs in. But some of those maybe some of your more marginal cases for freeze and rain, please just leave them out until they get closer to the shorter term. Based on request, I thought I would bring this up a little bit about the computation of pop. In Superblend for the warm season, when you look at that's defined April 1st to October 1st, the Superblend will just use the QPF for pop. So whatever the QPF is, like a quarter inch, you'll get a pop for that, different from a QPF of 500. But when we get into the cool season now, we're going to use both that QPF method as well as a neighborhood pop method based on a specific number of points that are greater than or equal to 300 around each grid point. And so in this cool season, you will likely see, or actually you will see higher pops produced throughout the forecast. In fact, what conshort, and this was actually found based on performance, that the neighborhood pop is used there year-round. The NBM technique is very similar to what we're doing in SuperBlend, where they've got this neighborhood top technique in place. They call it the Hamill technique. Tom Hamill was the developer for it, and then neighborhood thereafter. So, in the extent is that the neighborhood. So in the NBM, you are also going to see high pops, especially here in the cool season. So don't be afraid to have 70, 80 pops or higher there in the extended. They actually do a pretty good job verifying, even when we looked at last winter. Winds and wind gusts. I know there's been quite a bit of chatter on this. We've had a fair share of high wind events too recently. Welcome to fall. No matter the location, the cons moss and consol are better starting points than SuperBlend, and the reason for that is because of bias correction. It tends to knock the winds down. SuperBlend's not immune to this. The NBM has it as well. The NBM bias correcting to the IRMA and RTMA, and that also, has its issue. At least right now, there's no plan to replace SuperBlend with the cons moss consol for wind, primarily because here in the future we're going to be, and maybe not too far future here, utilizing the NBM. So we need to figure out to improve that. Remember, both the SuperBlend and the NBM are bias correcting to the IRMA, the RTMA. So it's like whatever we can do to fix the RTMA side of things would help then improve SuperBlend and the NBM. Another topic that's come up recently, and I want to provide some clarification to all of you, is about the wind gust grid. I know sometimes you just go in and assign what you think is going to be probably a peak gust, but it's not defined that way. The wind gust grid is actually more similar to what the G you would find in an ASOS. So I've grabbed an example from a recent high wind event in the upper Michigan here, October 24th, where there was a gust to 47 knots in this ASOS with a peak wind there that was higher. So again, you're shooting for the G and the OB. There are ideas being floated around from a national level to have a peak gust grid, very similar to like what we do for max T, min T, max RH, min RH, and I think that would be a really good thing to have, because then we can bring the peak gust into the various formatter products. So in the interim, I would say utilize your DSS messaging and your hazard products to convey the peak gust. And I think the last side about using cons moss, consol as a different starting point than SuperBlend and trying to improve them. I thought we talked a little bit about improvement in blends. The kind of the vision here going forward. Here for the in the short term, we want to recognize what the patterns where blends don't perform well or struggle, and then apply a tool set here to improve. There's that model certainty tool that was provided. That could be a big help. And the model certainty does a nice job of giving you statistical measures about where does your forecast fit within other elements. Jerry, actually, I'm going to open this up to you. Can you give some more info for model certainty that could be helpful for the field? Jerry?
Sorry, I was getting myself off mute.
There you go.
So, as far as model certainty goes, it's a tool that can really help with finding locations of which you don't know, like where you have a target that you want to see what the spread of the model is. And like what just happened with the winds a few weeks ago, Marcia here at our office was running the tool, and she saw that there was a spread of the models that were saying that we weren't going to quite get as strong of winds as what we were thinking we were going to get. And so in actuality, our forecast was above the 90th percentile of which the models were suggesting. So in that situation, they may try to help or you could use this tool to help you determine whether or not you want to issue a wind advisory. So that, that's just one of the examples that currently we used here. It's getting used a lot more at my office. I've been hearing that the Goodland office is using it. It's a tool that can really help you navigate what the spread of the models in GFE are saying. And we're going to try to get more information out there. It's been out, the tool itself has been around for, I think, about 7 or 8 months. So, if you have questions, feel free to get a hold of me. We're going to be doing some more work on it. Right now, it doesn't actually give percentile information. It uses standard deviation and a normal curve. But I'm going to actually be making an update that it can actually give percentile information. So for those of you that are interested in, or that have seen the probability of snow stuff where they have the 10th, 50th, and 90th, it'll be able to produce pretty much the same exact thing for you. And you can see the entire spread of the distribution. And some of my long-term plans are to make a box and whisker, sort of like how the model spectrum tool outside of the GFE world runs. It'll be very similar to that. So lots of plans with this tool of how we can improve things and get a better understanding of what the distribution in GFE is.
Thanks, Jerry. And then too, to help improve blends. So if you have a pattern that you've got struggling, we can try and get techniques into ForecastBuilder as a band-aid approach. But in the long term, if you have groups of offices that are running into the same problems day after day with the model, or with the, say with the NBM or whatever, we're going to try and see if we can work with the NBM SAG group and the developers to help improve the NBM. Provide meteorological background too is why the NBM fails in here. Like for example, the wind situation. I know the NBM developers are aware of it as well as is the RTMA Era group. And then perhaps too even providing possible code examples that they can bring in. A few other reminders here. There is an option for we're getting to that season now to switch to Stratiform. There's an option for that in ForecastBuilder config. There's lots of discussion on this. Drizzle is an accumulating element, so you need at least a 15 pop. People have wanted to have the non-accumulating and accumulating. Well, that's been tried. That was done a couple of years ago with the probability weather type, and it's just a mess. It's a mess for the forecasters. It's a mess in the coding. It's a mess for the formatters. Just trying to keep it simple. Put a 15 pop. Plus, it's better just be safe. You've got precipitation out there. Have a 100th on it, or not 100th, but have the 15th pop because it's not hard to get 100. The diurnal procedure issue out there, especially noticeable in the Great Lakes. If you have 2 minima maxima exist, your RLT can experience problems. Additionally, the current way we have diurnal configured, we force the temperature curve to hit the max and min T's. That can cause issues as well. So we are evaluating possible adjustments to help with that. Oh, and one last thing on the top down, this is also out of the training. Remember the max teal off versus max wet bulb, that the initial onset of precipitation will likely follow the max teal off temperature, whatever that temperature would correlate to P-type. So you could start off with rain and then go to sleet or snow as the environment wet bulbs. And of course, precip rate comes into play as well. Getting here to the end, a little bit on the ESTF and short-term forecast. This is a component of the weather radiation roadmap here in the Central Region. It's really to get us to focus our grid forecast and workload in the first 24 hours because that's where the trust in our forecast begins. A lot of our DSS messaging happens to reside in that time window. Also, the aviation forecasts are in there. And for a lot of the public, your EMs and that, your go no-go decisions are going to be made in this time frame. So this is where we definitely need to be working on. At the same time, there are a lot of data sources coming in, and they come in pretty frequently, on an hourly basis, like with the HER. we need a way to manage all that data coming in. We need to expand digital aviation services, or if we are expanding digital aviation services, that's going to require an update to the near-term database to ensure everything is in sync. So there's a couple different focus areas for the ESTF. Obviously, it's like initialization and monitoring that we need to be able to periodically refresh the database with latest data. We can leverage ForecastBuilder to do that pretty easily. Obviously, digital aviation grids, and then monitoring new data streams to highlight potential forecast adjustments. Another area is the training and research. We've got, from 2013, we put a suite of tools out there, but I think we really need to go back in and even instruct that, hey, these tools are here, how to use them, what are some good times that they can be used for, that's the best practice resource, some examples, maybe some case studies, looking at grid manipulation, what's the best way to edit some of these grids so that you don't end up with a whole bunch of workload. Obviously, utilizing things like the pencil tool can take forever. We don't want to be in that zone. We want to have the time to do our DSS messaging. So some way to do things quick and get what we want done in an efficient manner. And also having some operational feedback to help keep improving things, and having a group of volunteers designated to discuss issues. Jeremy Martin, the Sioux at Goodland, has been leading up the ESTF effort. Certainly, if you have any suggestions, concerns, comments, feel free to email him. And with that, I'm going to open this up for questions. They want to make some notes here on this slide here. Again, feel free to visit the BLAB site anytime. We've got a forum section on there, still getting posts on there. Love it. I'm trying to respond to those in a quick manner. There's the email there too. You can email us anytime. We are researching to see if we can kind of link up the two. That if you submit an email, I can go there on BLAB and just so that everybody can see all the various discussions that are happening. Because certainly if you email, you won't see them on BLAB, etc. We have been updating an FAQ page on the BLAB site. It kind of helps for questions that we keep getting that can be addressed through that. There's also the feedback form. I know we kind of probably for most have kind of stopped doing that during the summer months here, but I would recommend that to try and get back into looking to go through that feedback form for multiple reasons here. Of course, being database and analyzed, but it's a great way to provide feedback just in general. It's completely anonymous too, so you don't have to worry about your name being on there. It's good information. And again, the grid team reviews it frequently. All right, with that, we'll open it up for questions here. Looking if you can, just raise your hand and I can unmute you. Let's see, there is a question here. All right. Somebody would like to see an example of the model certainty tool. See a question there from John in the southern region. Give me a minute here. I can pull that. Up. I think I have the model certainty in a previous webinar. So. think. We had hazard builder goods. Yeah, no, we were going to try and get an example of that model certainty for this webinar, but we don't have one right now. Let me see here. I'm going to pause showing the screen here for a minute. Okay. No. unfortunately, I don't have that. I will, John. I will send that. I will send some example there to you about the model certainty tool, though. Here, path bumpers. All right. Let me see here. All right, Matt. I got you here unmuted.
Yeah, Andy, I've got a couple questions. The first has to do with the low wind bias. I don't necessarily think that is linear, meaning that the bias is probably different for wind speeds, say less than 15 miles an hour. Maybe it's a little different between 15 to 30, 30 to 45. So is that something that you or the NBM developers have looked at, applying differing biases depending upon the wind speeds?
That's a great question. Jerry, I know you've been kind of in line a little bit with the wind development on the NBM side. Have you heard anything on that?
Unfortunately, no. The big issue here is most of the time when you're bias correcting these, it's for somewhat non-events, and I think the models tend to over forecast that. So then when we get to the big events where we want there to be high wind a high wind speed, what ends up happening is the bias correction sort of corrects it down, which isn't obviously what we want, and so that's why we're hurt there. There is going to be some work, I think, on the national blend level. They know about it, but the biggest issue here is also with the IRMA. IRMA just isn't handling things quite right. It itself has a low bias. So because of that, we're running into to this bias correction issue. So I think the big work that needs to be done on this is going to be done with how the RTMA and IRMA folks are creating that analysis.
I think you actually gave a good reason why they should be bias correcting differently for low wind speeds versus the higher wind speeds, because the biases appear to be different for the two different scenarios. So then, Andy, my next question has to do with the aviation consistency. You talked about that if there's blowing snow or definite blowing snow, it would lower the visibility. Well, so our aviation grids are produced on the cron. We don't directly edit them or use the forecast builder. So are those consistency checks being performed for us in that situation or not?
No. The way it would work is that if you had aviation turned on in Forecast Builder, then some of these checks would apply. Yeah. Or most of these are all if your aviation's turned on.
And we would actually have to make then that selection in the Forecast Builder, correct, or not?
No, they would automatically take place. So
okay, so we should be able to just go into our config file and basically turn on the digital aviation services then, right?
Yep. And so wherever so when your Bagley snow model is putting out or when the blown snow tool, I should say, no combination, puts out definite blown snow, you're going to get you'll get visibility. Your visibility grid will drop to the half mile.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thanks. All right. Let's hear. Does anybody else have questions? If not, I would like to say here, thank you all for attending. I know it's a little longer than usual calls. Again, if you ever have questions, feel free to visit our VLab site, the email address, enter something in the feedback form. Any of those three methods will work, and we'll be in contact with you. And always, if you have ideas for improvement, send those along as well. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day and good holidays.